Armenian history is quite long. I'll be giving you a summary of it. It's going to be a very interesting trip. So sit back. We're going to travel about 4,000 years. Of course, I'm not going to get every detail because if I do, then we will be here 2030. So I don't intend to do that. First of all, I'd like to greet all of you that we're all children of God. Those of you who believe that, fine. Those of you who do not believe that, that's fine with me too. I'm not imposing my fate on you. But we're all created in the image of God. Whether our skin is black, white, red, it doesn't matter. We're all children of God and we're sisters and brothers. With that intent, we can always be respectful and lovable, whomever we meet, or our neighbors, or anybody that is in contact with us. Nobody is bigger and more powerful than another person. With that intent, I just like to greet all of you very sincerely. I don't know if there are some even Muslims here, atheists, Christians, Jews, it doesn't matter. We're all brothers and sisters. Now, as I said, we're going to travel about 4,000 years. Armenians were considered by David Marshall Lang, who is a historian, and he wrote many books, historical books, but he wrote a book that he said Armenia was the cradle of civilization. What does that mean? That we were a civilized nation way back 4,000 years ago. And then I read some other items about in the recent past that they found a shoe in one of the provinces in Armenia. It was a male shoe, and they examined it, and the scientists found out that this shoe was about 7,000 years old. Now, I don't know beyond that how that happened, but I can tell you a story tonight that starts from 4,000 years and on. Armenia was governed by dynasty kings. We had 26 kings. And our Dikran the Great, in the first century of BC, he was very remarkable. He was so influential and he loved the people. And the Armenians at that point were very rich and commerce was good. And imagine if you can visualize the map from Caspian Sea to the Black Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. All that area was all Armenia. However, there were many wars by the Mamluks, the many other neighboring countries that it got smaller and smaller. Our last kingdom was Kingdom of Cilicia, which was right next to the Mediterranean Sea. And our last king was Leo the Fifth. And again, the Egyptian Seljuks attacked, and he was in exile in Paris, and he passed away. So that is the last of the Armenian kingdom, the 14th century. And from the 15th century up to 20th century, we became subjugated to the Turkish Ottoman Empire. Before I get to go to the intricacies of the genocide, let's see some more information before that. How did Armenians become what they were? As you know, after Christ died and got risen, his disciples went to different countries. And the two disciples that came to Armenia were Thaddeus and Bartholomew. And they tried to evangelize Armenia, and there were many pockets of Christians there. But the king Dertad at the time was not an Armenian. was not a Christian, I should say, and he forbade anybody to talk about that. And Saint Gregory came around 3rd century, and he started preaching, and the king did not like that. He put him in a very deep, deep ditch. That was like a prison thing. We call that in Armenian Chor Virab. So he stayed there 13 years, and 2 women used to come give him a little water and food to make him, alive. And finally, King Durtad got ill, and he had a vision, and he became a Christian. And he released Saint Gregory from the Khorvirab, from the deep ditch that he was at. By the way, my husband and I visited Armenia in 1986, and now on top of that hill, there's a church and a monastery, and the Khor Virab is right there. And I tried to go down. I went halfway down. It was so dangerous. I said, I'm coming back, because the stairs were made of wood, and then it started squeaking and cracking, and I came back. But many people from all over the world come there, because that was the first Christian nation. And King Durtad made Armenia officially 301 AD the Christian nation in the world. And thus, Saint Echmiadzin was built in Yerevan. That's a beautiful, beautiful church. And many people from all over the world come and see Saint Echmiadzin. That was 301 AD. Now, even they became Christian, they didn't have their alphabet, they didn't have their own Bibles. They had spoken Indo-European languages, mixed some with Greek and others. And Saint Mesrob was a very leading, very astute priest. He took his disciples, he said, I will go and find out how we can get a whole lecture for the letters in whatever way our speech is. Now, Armenian is a very beautiful language. As a matter of fact, it's said that if anybody has to speak an international language, it should be Armenian. And I'm not just saying that because I'm Armenian, but grammar is so steady. The sound system, you don't combine letters with any other letters to make a sound. For instance, in English, you say sh, sh. And if you want to say I'm chatting, so ch. But in Armenian, you have a letter for every sound, plus a hard one and a soft one. So if you can learn Armenian with your ears, it's very, very easy to speak it, because the grammar and everything is very, very consistent. It doesn't change. Let me give you a small example. For instance, if you want to say the Tsar of Russia, Tsar, that's a sound which is softer. And then if I say the Tsara, that means a tree. You see, your ears have to be so accustomed to that. Now, if somebody's learning English for the first time, and you try to learn the grammar, let's say book, you add an S to it, it becomes plural, it becomes books. Make the plural of foot. It's not foots, it's feet. And then you have B-O-U-G-H, that's a bough, a branch. And then T-O-U-G-H, what does that become? Tau? No. What does it become? Tough. So you have to have a memory for the English language to learn it. And if you like to see the Armenian alphabet, I wrote it out in both print way and the script way. It's going to be in the exhibit room after my talk tonight. So you're welcome to come and peruse and see a lot of historical events. So after many years looking how they can make this perfect, Saint Mesrop Mashtots is where he came from, they created the Armenian alphabet, 36 letters. And later on, during the kingdom of our last kingdom, they had added 2 more letters. So as a whole, it's 38 letters. Okay. So we know about the Armenian alphabet, we know about the Christianity. Now, in 451 AD, Persia, today's Iran, which has been in the newspapers, in the news lately, they wanted the Armenians to become Zoroastrianists. They were worshipping Zoroastrianism and they forced Armenians to do the same. And of course, Bartan Mamigonian, who was our leader, he was such a devout Christian. He got his army of 66,000 on the battlefield of Avavrair and came to meet the Persian army, which was 300,000 plus 10,000 horsemen plus elephants. Now you say elephants, those were the tanks of today. They ran right into the people, damaging. And that was 451 in the summer. The Armenians started with prayer and having communion, and the priest prayed with them. And Saint Fartan said, "You can take anything from us. You can scare us with fire, sword, anything. We will not give our religion at all." The reason I'm emphasizing this part, that is the reason that later on the same thing happened when the Armenians became subjugated to the Turkish Ottoman Empire. They never wanted to give their religion away. They were Christians. And of course, that was a sore point with the Turkish government. There were also Jewish immigrants there, and minorities, and Greeks. And those were not as big as ours because we had lived in that whole area. So that whole area was Armenian minorities. After they got their alphabet, our Bibles were translated, and it is so easy for people to read the whole stories rather than from mouth to mouth. It never stays the same. So that was perfected. Now, they again had many wars, Armenia. They lost more ground. And that part is quite lengthy. You have to really study it in detail. But I'm not going to dwell on that too much, except that it came the time when 1894 and 1896. By the way, the Turkish Ottoman Empire was governed by sultans. The House of Osman had 35 sultans. The first 10 sultans contributed a great deal to make the empire really wide and rich. The next 25 sultans got everything downgraded. They lost ground, they lost many things. And the very last sultan, Sultan Abdul Hamid II, was a brutal ruler. Europeans called him the Red Sultan because he had so much Armenian blood in his hands. Now, if I describe some of them, it's going to be very gory, but I'll just touch upon a few because he was that. He would take his imams, go across towns, and collect all the little boys, tie their hands and feet, turn them on their tummy on the ground, while one imam is reading the Quran, the other one was going around cutting the heads of those little boys. When the parents could not take that, they would be sobbing, screaming. They ran into the nearest church, locked the church. Guess what? They went and poured kerosene all around the church and burned them all alive. He did such brutal things. And then he released all his prisoners free. And these were all criminals. They went ransacking Armenian businesses, homes, raping the young women, and such horrendous things. It was unbelievable. And finally, the European countries said, if you continue this, we're going to send all our journalists and you're going to be, you're going to be seen everywhere. So everybody's going to hate you and you're going to get out. And at that time, the young Winston Churchill, he did not know what to call this crime. He said, "This is so horrific. There's no name for this." Anyway, he killed about 300 to 400,000 Armenians. Then there was something brewing in his own empire. First of all, he was very phobic person. He built extra walls around the palace because he was always afraid somebody's going to kill him. He even called his own ministers, his own Turkish ministers, parasites. He didn't trust anyone. So he wanted to make a name for himself to kill all the Armenians once and for all. However, there was something brewing in his government. There were young Turks that they didn't want him to be that ferocious, to get a bad name for them. They wanted to build a new government. They called it CUP, C-U-P, Committee of Union and Progress. In 1908, they came out. They wanted to cast out Sultan Hamid, which happened. He was let go. And this group came on the surface, and the Armenians were so happy. They thought, this is great. They're going to westernize the whole empire. We may have a chance now. What they did, they sent thousands and thousands of Armenian young men, 20 to 40 years old, to the army because they wanted to be contributing to this new government. By the way, here I can mention to you that in all of the history, Armenians were such good citizens. At that point, the bankers, the professors, the lawyers, the commerce people were all Armenian. If they didn't help, that Ottoman Empire would have gone down much sooner. They knew that, but they just wanted to get rid of them because they will not become Muslims. Now, in the Armenian communities, in the Armenian generations, Armenian hearts, there are three very basic things that we really cherish. Number one, it's our church, our religion. We're Christians and we're proud of that. And we instilled that in our children, and that's how it was from 301 AD on to now. The second thing, family. Family is very close knit. And in Armenian communities, you never saw nursing homes. The mother and the father of the family became the main person who sat at the head of the table, and they were very much respected. Henry and I, when we went to Armenia, he had a lot of cousins there because they, when Stalin was in rule, he sent his officers to get migrations from Armenian communities, and some had gone there to build Armenia as it is now. And when we went to their house, it was so beautiful. The table was from here to there, all the cousins and children and grandchildren, but the grandfather sat at the very head and the grandmother sat at the very head, and they were so revered. And that was a beautiful picture. And another thing that was interesting, we here in the United States, we're used to eating 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. And they don't. In Armenia, they didn't. I don't know if they changed now. And in Europe too, in Spain too, nobody opens their restaurants at 6 o'clock. It starts 9 o'clock. From 9 o'clock on to 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, they're still eating and dancing and singing and all that. It was a big treat for us. So we enjoyed that tremendously. Now, let's go to April 24. What happened was, in the summer of 1914, World War I broke. The Archduke of Austria and his wife were murdered. So that gave a lot of commotion. The war began September of 1914. And that gave those young Turks the idea, this is a great opportunity for us. Now that the world will be busy with the war, this is the time to get rid of the Armenians. But they had a different method. They said they're going to deport them from their homes. Now, just imagine you're sitting having dinner with your family, having your child's birthday, you're singing happy birthday, and all of a sudden you get a knock on your door. Some policemen or gendarmes, whatever they were, they call you, they say, well, be ready, tomorrow you're going to be deported. Huh? Deported where? Don't ask questions. And those towns that asked questions and those towns that resisted, they were killed immediately. They were shot, they were beheaded, and many other atrocities. Now, this was getting around the news all over the towns. We had a young minister in Zaytun, which was from Musada. Now, let me explain what Musada means. Musa in Turkish means Moses. Dar means mountain. Mount Moses Girl. That's what I call my book. Now, you may say, why did you call your book Mount Moses Girl? Because I was born there years later. The very same town my mom and dad were born. And they got their decree that they're going to be deported beginning of July. Now, this minister was in Zaytun, they just killed all the people there, and he wanted to come to his own town to tell his people what is happening. He says, don't believe that they're just deporting you to take you someplace else. They're killing you because that's the purpose, to deport you, because during the deportations, they took them to the Syrian desert. By the way, I went back to see where Syrian desert was. Before I wrote my book, I wanted to go to see the Syrian desert where my people died with hunger, starvation, and I wanted to go to the top of Musada. I'll come to that, and I have pictures that you can see. So they had given the decree to the 7 villages of Musada. Now, we say 7, but other people say 6 because one of the villages was only 2 families. And we skip that, we say 6 villages. There were Vakuf, Khederbek, Bityas, Haji Habli, Kebuse, Yonoluk. Those are very big villages. And they were right under the Musadar, Mount Moses. They were all, the higher one was Bityas, then it was Haji Habli, the middle was Yonoluk, and by the seashore was Kebuse. When this minister came, his name was Dikran Antriasyan. By the way, they gave him a lot of trouble, the Turks, because they wouldn't allow him to get out of Zaytun. But the Christian missionaries from the United States, Presbyterian missionaries, they made him possible to get out of there with his pregnant wife. And they got to Yonoluk. When he got to Yonoluk, he called all the mayors, all the leaders, all the ministers, and all the priests, saying that what the intent of these young Turks are, not just to deport you, but they are killing everybody. And those 3 major ones who were the culprit of the whole thing was Talat Pasha, Enver Pasha, Cemal Pasha. Pasha in Turkish means Lord. These were military men, and they just took upon themselves to get rid of the Armenians. Okay, now, our group had their decree to get out and be ready. When they came, they're going to be marching to the desert. They had long discussions till dawn that we're going to get killed anyway. Why should we stay here, wait for them to do that? And they're going to abuse our women and kill us in a very horrific way. Why don't we die honorably? We go on top of Musada and fight. Now, of course, we didn't have a big army as they did, but we had about 200, 250 young men who were very good sharpshooters, including my mother's 2 brothers. They were very, very good marksmen, and they fought in that Musada battle. And the younger son of Father Abraham, by the way, we name a lot of biblical names. We have a lot of Moses and a lot of Abrahams and Solomon and all that. We use those names. And Father Abraham gathered all the major leaders with Minister Reverend Andrea. They decided that the best thing to do is to get to the top of the mountain, fight the Turks. If they kill us, we'll die honorably. If not, maybe, maybe there will be warship passing by the seashore and they save us. Now, they weren't sure of that, but they prayed and they said, we'll do that. The majority of them decided they're going to do that. In Haji Habli, the minister there said, oh, we may be punished more severely if we disobey the Turkish government, therefore, let's not go. So there were some families who stayed. By the way, nobody heard of them anymore. They were gone, they were killed. But before they were killed, about 100 gendarmes come the day that they're going to take them on their deportation trips. Almost all the houses were empty. They said, where are they? Where are they? They went and forced the people who had remained there. They said, they're all on top of the mountain. And the way they did that, when it turned dark, they took their pots and pans, their mattresses, their pillows, whatever they can take, their grain, their lentils, their whatever, so that they didn't know how long they're going to be there, and their cattle. They were all organized there according to the villages. And Father Abraham's son, Moses, that's another Moses, Moses der Kalusian, he was a very intelligent young man. He became almost the general of the group. He didn't have any military experience, but he knew exactly what group should be where and which the trees should protect them. And then the roads, he gave orders to the men who were not in fighting condition to cut branches to cover all the roads so that Turkish soldiers cannot come up easily. And even the little boys, anywhere 7 to 10 years old, they were the messengers. They didn't have like today's iPhones, smartphones, whatever to communicate. So if a group was at this point, they would write down, the Turks are coming, they're about this area. They would bring that note to the other group. And this way they carried their information. And the elderly women were the cooks. They cooked. And the young ladies, my mom was an engaged young lady, and my grandparents on my father's side, they were so afraid they're going to kill their only son. They sent him to America. So my father came to America, and my mother was very, very sad. And she thought maybe she'll never see him again because they never knew how quickly the Turkish soldiers going to come and kill them. In August, the fighting became fierce.